The Bee Movie.
For no reason! Seriously, what the frick, guys? I mean, seriously, I hate all you frickin'
The Bee Movie.
haters!
The Bee Movie, a movie with a cult-like following of intellects and people with just great taste in media in general.
Bullshit. Bullshit. Derivative. That I love. I absolutely love.
Like, if you meet somebody that is a fan of the Bee Movie, you cling on to that person for dear life and you beg them that they be a part of your life. People that like the Bee Movie are the top tier people in our society. They really are the pillars of our society, the people that hold us together, like the honey of our society. They keep us all together and are very sticky. I don't know why I said that, I made that quite weird, but you know what I'm getting at. They are just really top tier people. The movie at first seems to be just another cash grabbing kids movie about talking creatures, talking animals and stuff. However, when you actually watch this movie, it's this incredible story of just this regular working guy, this regular working bee who raises everyone's expectations of him when he sues the entire human race for taking advantage, stealing and profiting from the bees, which in turn shows the humans how important bees actually are to our society and how we probably should start respecting them a bit more, which in turn makes them beg for Barry B. Benson's forgiveness, in turn saving the bees and also the planet. And just to top this whole movie off, Barry B. Benson steals a human girlfriend away from his biggest hater, who is this man here, voiced by Joe Swanson from Family Guy. The movie is a goddamn masterpiece. It's also actually quite fitting in today's day and age. This is because it dives into the topic of how we as a society need to start looking after and respecting the bees more. It's crazy how art imitates life. Or maybe Jerry Seinfeld just knew something that we didn't, like who knows it. I mean, this guy to be Phil looks like he's seen some stuff. He looks like he knows things that we don't yet. However, when I was a kid and I was like watching this movie, I always used to wonder, like, who came up with this? Like, yeah, it's iconic, it's amazing and stuff, but it's also quite strange. Like, just look at this nonsense. So, in today's video, I'm going to be going over everything to do with DreamWorks' The Bee Movie. Now, the Bee Movie actually has quite an interesting backstory. The idea of the characters and the storylines of the movie revolving around like bees and stuff came from Jerry Seinfeld. Now, Jerry Seinfeld is known most probably for being a comedian, and he was also in the series Seinfeld. He's a very talented comedian and actor who Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was the head of DreamWorks at the time, wanted to work with in order to create an animated film. Now, Big Jerry would always say no to creating an animated movie. He had no interest in it until he had an idea, and he would always just tell Big Jeffrey that he didn't want to create a movie. Like, basically, no, leave me alone. He basically told Jeffrey Katzenberg to piss off. That was until one night when Jerry Seinfeld was hanging about with big Steven Spielberg, you know, like as you do, because I think they were neighbours, I read. Jerry Seinfeld told Steven Spielberg about this idea that he had for a movie called The Bee Movie, and how he kind of wanted it to be like an animated film, but he wasn't really sure if it was like a good idea or not. After Jerry Seinfeld told Steven Spielberg about this idea that he had for the movie, Steven Spielberg tried to get him to call Jeffrey Katzenberg, but I think he just like couldn't be annoyed or whatever. So Steven Spielberg is the god of the Bee Movie. He basically called Jeffrey Katzenberg and he basically said to him, you need to call Jerry Seinfeld and listen to this idea that he has for this animated movie. It's like god worthy. The rest, as they say, is history, and development began for the Bee Movie. Now, you may be wondering, why did Jerry pick bees? It's a bit random, isn't it? Like, has he got like a bee fetish or something? No, this is because apparently Jerry Seinfeld has like a weird fascination with bees. I don't think it's weird, I think I'm making it weird. But he basically thinks that they're quite fascinating little creatures, like from their colour palette to the fact that they can create honey, and also the fact as well that they can fly despite the physics of that not really making any sense. Like, they are like tiny little gods in the eyes of Jerry Seinfeld. And this interest that he had for bees then got him thinking about how bees would react if they could comprehend the fact that humans would take honey from them and like would resell it and profit from it. And that's kind of where the idea of the Bee Movie came from, like the actual storyline of the Bee Movie, because that's actually what it's about. But like, because I think people just think about the fact that the bee and the human woman like get together, but like I actually watched it and that isn't even really what happens. But I think that's the thing that people remember for the Bee Movie. But the actual plot of it is the bees sue the humans. Anyway, this is how the storyline for the Bee Movie was actually decided upon, and Jerry Seinfeld decided that he would be the voice of the main character, the icon that is Barry B. goddamn Benson. He is a king. I'm just a Barry B. Benson stan. I'll stop being a Barry B. Benson simp and I'll just continue the story. Now, originally the character was going to look like a B version of Jerry Seinfeld, which I actually think would be quite disturbing. However, they thankfully changed the character design a lot, but they kept the voice as Mr. Seinfeld. A lot of the creative team behind the B movie, so like the storyboard workers and animators and stuff like that, actually helped out with the voice acting in the early production of the movie, and a lot of their voices can still actually be heard in the final product. The movie was in production for about 4 years and was finally released in theatres on the God-given day of November 2nd, 2007. Now, I think it's time we take a little break from the facts and logic and we just get into the final product that is the B movie. Now, the B movie opens with one of the most iconic opening scenes ever displayed in an animated movie. In a movie in general, I don't care if you want to say it's like Star Wars or The Avengers or something, like shut up, not Snow, it's the B movie. It's this, this here, this changed a whole generation, this changed the landscape of cinema. This is nothing less than iconic, and anybody that wants to say otherwise
is a savage and an idiot!
The B movie follows the story of Barry B. Benson, who has just graduated from B college and is ready to start his little B life. However, we begin to see the reality of this situation begin to set in for Barry, that being that he's going to have to do the exact same job every single day of his life until he dies. Now, this realisation spooks the entire life out of Barry B. Benson. Like, he is not happy about this, and to be fair, like, I feel like a lot of people can relate to that, and I think that's actually something when I watched the B movie, I was actually like, oh damn, like, this movie's quite deep. I didn't expect it to be that deep. I actually kind of forgot what the movie was about when I watched it, and I was like, oh my god, like this movie is actually quite intense, like goddamn, like he's a relatable guy, you know what I mean? Now, this also causes him to have like a wee bit of a meltdown, and he begins to kind of like have a wee bit of like a midlife crisis because he's never been outside of the hive, and he's scared that no, he's never going to be able to because he's going to have to do another job. Well, you don't get any days off when you're a bee, you need to work forever. So Barry basically wants to go outside, and like he's kind of just gone on about that to his pal, and his pal is just like, shut up Barry, like just do your bee job and stop being a bum, right? But Barry is like, no, Barry wants to go outside. However, after annoying the pollen bees, now I know in the movie they're called pollen jocks, but I refuse to call them that, right? So they're getting called pollen bees, right? So basically the pollen bees decide to give Barry the chance to fly outside with them to see the outside world, and Barry's basically like, this is his one chance to do that before he has to live a life of hell, in his opinion. Like, he has to go and live this pure horrible life where he does the exact same job every single day for the rest of his life, and basically he is like, this is like the one chance I'm going to get to see the actual real world, and he took it and he was like, yes, I'm going to go. So basically Barry goes to the outside world with the pollen bees. Now, this is a very important scene as it shows Barry and us the viewers the importance of the bees in our world. Now, even though in this scene it just shows how the bees kind of pollinate the flowers and stuff, and it doesn't really look like it's that big of a deal, and they actually call it like they kind of downplay it a wee bit and just say, oh, like we just kind of do this because it's like for giggles or whatever. However, this is kind of dropping some seeds into your brains to kind of show like, oh, the bees are quite important to the greenery and to the outside world and stuff like that. Like, they're very important to nature, and this will be brought back up later, so like just keep that in mind, right? Like, this scene's very important to the overall movie. However, this excitement is short-lived as there is an incident with some tennis balls, which then ends up with Barry being separated from the pollen bees. This then leads him to meeting Vanessa, who is this human woman right here. She saves him from getting killed by her boyfriend Ken, who is played by Joe Swanson from Family Guy. This gives Barry the incentive to talk to Vanessa, which by the way is like this big bad bee thing. Like, you're not allowed to talk to people like humans, like the bees aren't allowed to let the humans know that they can speak. So Barry breaks bee law just to talk to this lady, right? And basically he could go to bee jail. I don't know if there is bee jail, they didn't really specify that, but I'm sure there's some sort of government punishment for bees that speak to humans, you know what I mean? However, I actually brought this scene up because I wanted to bring up the fact that this is where Barry utters his most iconic line, which is,
"You like jazz?"
Anyway, him and Vanessa talk and quickly become homies. Now, because Barry's going to visit Vanessa more and more, she takes him to a supermarket. Now, I don't think this was meant to show him the honey, like they just went into a supermarket, and this is where Barry sees something that leaves him shaking and crying violently. He sees that honey is being sold. Now this angers Barry because he states to Vanessa that bees have no idea that they're being worked this hard so that humans could just come and take their hard work and their product away from them to sell. I think it also angers him because in this movie, like, honey is used for basically everything. It's like their source of life, it's their fuel, it's their infrastructure, it's even simple like everyday stuff like their hair gel and like swimming pools and stuff. Basically Barry's point is that the bees need this honey to survive. It's like they need it for their societies to function properly, and humans are just coming about and taking it for their own selfish gain, which is extremely rude, and I agree with Barry. That is actually quite rude, to be fair. Barry decides that he's going to investigate one of the brands, and he finds basically like a work camp of bees. So basically it's like a honey farm essentially, and also the bees are basically being like abused in these farms, like they're being treated awfully. So Barry is outraged, like he's livid at this point, right? So he basically gets some evidence of this happening and decides that he is going to sue the human race. This starts the trial of Barry B. Benson against all of the human race, the trial of the century if you will, and he wins because of course he does, because he's an absolute king and an icon. But this means that all of the working bees are free from the work camps and stuff, and also just the bees in general are free, and all the honey is given back to all of the bees in the world. So basically this means that because there's so much honey now, the bees don't need to work anymore, because like they'll if they work then they'll just add into all this honey and they've not got room to keep it all. So the bees stop working and they're basically, for the first time in millions of years, they've got the day off, like they've got some time to themselves. Basically at first it seems like everybody's having a pure smashing all time and stuff like that. However, the reality of what Barry has just done begins to quickly set in, and everyone starts to realise that this was a big oopsie. Now, this is where I would like to bring back up the point that I made at the beginning of the review of the Bee Movie, where I spoke about how Barry sees how important bees are to the ecosystem and the greenery and stuff. But I think because it was downplayed so much to Barry, he didn't really understand how important they really were. And so what begins to happen is, because the bees are no longer going out to collect pollen for the honey, they aren't pollinating the flowers, and what begins to happen as a result is all the flowers begin to die and all the greenery starts to die. Now, as well as this, the bees themselves are miserable because they've no longer got their work to go to, like they're no longer working bees, so they've not really got a lot to live for, and they don't really know what to do with themselves because, you know, like work is all they've known and work is all they want to do and stuff. But Barry kind of done this out of selfish gain, because Barry didn't want to work and he thought that this would be great for everybody, because he thought it would be great for him, he thought it would be good for everybody as a result. So Barry's quite a selfish guy, right? But he's also a king, because there were positives that came from this lawsuit, like such as the closing of the bee farms and stuff like that, and like freeing the bees that had been enslaved and stuff like that. However, it also had negative effects as well, like such as like the plants and stuff dying, and also the well-being of the bees kind of going down and stuff like that. Now this causes Barry to have a wee change of heart, and he decides that he has to save the planet. And so what he does is they basically go to this flower festival to get the last remaining flowers on Earth, and they bring them back on a plane. Now the plane goes down basically because Barry decided to annoy the pilots, and so what happens is the bees all come and help Barry to land the plane. It is like honestly one of the most iconic scenes in cinematic history. Like, how powerful is this scene? So they help Barry land the plane, and the flowers are all released, and all of the pollen bees, including Barry, who is now a pollen bee, like they get him a wee jacket and that, and he is an actual pollen bee now, and they all take the pollen and they start spreading it about, and order in society is restored. This movie ends with Barry and Vanessa becoming partners in a company that focuses on animal law, I guess, about, as well as selling cruelty-free honey as well as flowers. The end. Now, I think this movie is actually quite topical in today's day and age, as bees are becoming endangered, and although the circumstances are different as to why they'll eventually stop being around and like doing their jobs effectively and stuff like that, the effects will still be the exact same. Like, they will most likely be the same. We need to save the bees. We need the bees to survive. These tiny little insects are so valuable to us as a society, and we need to save the bees. Also, I think the movie addressing other important subjects like Barry's arc of not just forcing himself to be someone he's not and truly listening to himself and fighting for what he believes in is actually really wholesome, and it's a really good message to send to the viewers. And I think as well the fact that Barry can admit that he was wrong about stuff as well is really cool, and it shows that he's a flawed character but he's actually a Chad at the same time. He's a king. He's my favourite character. I love him so much. Anyway, this movie is so good, and I actually don't care. Like, see people that think it's like the worst DreamWorks movie, like,
Shut up! Shut up!
The B-movie done pretty well at the box office, gaining around $10.2 million on its first day, and overall gained $293.5 million worldwide. Now, I'm not a maths guy, I'm not a movie guy, and I'm not a money guy, so I don't know if that's good or no. However, what I will say is that the B-movie is so iconic that I'm just gonna say that's pretty damn good. It was nominated for many awards, including Best Animated Feature Film at the Golden Globe. However, although it was nominated for many awards at many different award shows, it didn't actually win anything, and I think it's really disgraceful, but that's just me, you know what I mean? Like, the B-movie would have won everything for me, but that again, that's just me. I'm very biased, of course. Now, the B-movie to me is a masterpiece and is in my top 10 films at number 1, of course. However, the critics didn't really share my top tier opinion, as they kind of dragged the movie a wee bit. This is because most critics didn't have the best things to say about the movie. I think that it's known to be one of the more hated DreamWorks movies, but I don't really understand it. I think it's really funny. Like, I thought it was really good. Like, I don't know what you're all watching. It's art, and I don't understand how people hate it. However, it wasn't all negative, as some critics complimented the movie for having a lot of like funny moments and stuff like that. However, its downfall is always that plotline of Vanessa, a human, leaving her boyfriend for Barry B. Benson, a bee. Like, it's kinda like bestiality a wee bit. I don't know, I don't really understand like the logistics of it. However, I'd like to argue that the ridiculousness of the movie is why it's like so iconic. Like, a lot of animated kids movies are like so forgettable and stuff, but the B movie is not like that, and that's why it's so iconic. That crazy plotline makes you remember the movie because it's so insane, and like no other movie would ever dare to create anything like it. Now, I kind of want to touch upon a point that I made in the previous section of this video. I mentioned that the plot of the B-movie is why it is so memorable, and this point was made so clear to me when the B-movie began to become a meme. Now, DreamWorks as a studio has this weird thing of having their movies and characters becoming memes and like actual important figures in the landscape of like internet culture and stuff like that. Examples of this are the Boss Baby from Boss Baby, and of course we couldn't bring this point up without talking about Shrek. Basically all the characters in Shrek at this point, but like Shrek is just a pure cultural phenomenon within itself, but it's like that kind of vibe. It's always DreamWorks movies, like it's never any other studio, always DreamWorks. And Barry B. Benson is absolutely no exception to the show. He's a vital member of this kind of club of characters and movies from DreamWorks that have been taken and made into something so beautiful by the internet. There's the classic example of the phrase
You like jazz?
being a haha funny meme saying on the internet. Now, this could be linked back to this video uploaded on the 18th of December 2016. The video went viral and currently has 22 million views on YouTube, and this had a huge impact on the B-movie status in regards to internet culture. This is because it inspired people to use the phrase like "yeah, like jazz" and run with it, which created so many iconic memes and stuff with this phrase. However, I'd actually like to bring up a phenomenon that changed the landscape of memes in my opinion. I know that this format of like what I'm about to talk about has been about forever, but I'd like to argue that I think this kind of trend with doing it with the B-movie is what made it popular. Now, in 2016, a video was uploaded to YouTube called The Entire B-Movie, but every time it says B, it gets faster. Just an innocent little idea that somebody created, probably thought it would be funny and stuff. The video spawned a trend of people making these types of videos on the B-movie specifically. Like, it wasn't just a 2016 trend, no, this nonsense is still being uploaded. One of my favourites being the B-movie at 3000 times speed, except when they say B, and it doesn't stop there. There was another trend with the B-movie that had people reading the entire script of the B-movie. Just the entire script. Like, people would upload full-length videos of them just reading the entire script of the B-movie. I remember back in the day people would have live streams and stuff of them just reading the script. Even Mr. Beast, who is arguably like one of the biggest content creators right now, like participated in this trend like back in the day. These videos get thousands and even millions of views, and even in the last year or two, the B-movie videos and stuff like that, like they're still relevant. And it's crazy to think that the B-movie was released more than a decade ago and it's still so relevant and even helped to shape the internet culture as we know it today. I'd say that it's just as important as Shrek at this point. I mean, to be fair, like nothing's as important as Shrek, but like, you know what I'm saying, It's an absolute treasure. It's a masterpiece. I think that art and media are very subjective and stuff, and people can like or dislike the B-movie if they want. We, the chads of society, the actual respecting members of society, all know that it's a top-tier chef's kiss movie. However, everyone's allowed their wrong opinion, I suppose. I'd like to say though that although it may not be the absolute best thing to ever be created, I mean I think it is, but not everybody seems to share my opinion. I think we should all as a society acknowledge the cultural impact that this movie had, and even though it was released more than a decade ago, it still finds itself being relevant, which is why it is the greatest movie to ever be created, and you can all cry about it, but you know it's true.